Welcome to Regenerative Voices, Elevating Stories, Activating Change. I'm your host, Seleyn DeYarus, founder and executive director of At the Epicenter. And with me today is Charles Eisenstein, a deep sensing human who is sought after speaker and an author of several thought-provoking books, including Climate, A New Story, Sacred Economics, and The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know is Possible. Charles, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Seleyn.
Thank
Good to be with you.
Well, I'm super happy. We were so thrilled to have you speak at our Regenerative Earth Summit in October. You were quite a hit with so many people who, I literally got notes to me that said this was a game-changing talk. So thank you for bringing that deep sensing presence that you have.
Yeah, that was a great conference. A lot of really interesting people there and good energy and enthusiasm. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, it was awesome to have you there. And I appreciate your saying that. I love bringing unique perspectives together. And we've been so fortunate to have such extraordinary people at the front of the room and also in the room. I wanted us to talk, we're all still inside of this very extraordinary global pandemic. And it obviously has many, many impacts. But one of the ones that I'm curious to explore with you is, can we perhaps use this moment in time to elevate an enriched perspective around new ideas, particularly one that I love that you speak about, which is the sacred. And I'm going to read a quote from your book, Sacred Economics, to sort of start us off. Sacred is the gateway to understanding the unity of all things. It is equally a gateway to the uniqueness and specialness of each thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Did you want me to comment on that?
I'd like it to sort of be where we step forward from in our conversation, because I think, as you say eloquently in your book, the word sacred often has this more religious connotation to it. But I think of sacred as sort of the appreciation of the imbued mystery and extraordinariness of all life. And that for me to perceive that as living, as deserving of my respect and my care in relating with all that is, that to me is an imbued expression of a sense of the sacred.
Yes. Yeah. So I was saying in the book that that sacred is a function of relationship and uniqueness. And I think I might have been contrasting it to commodities, which are shorn of their relationships because they're taken out of the ground and processed and standardized, right. And thereby also there's no uniqueness either. It's not sacred because it's just like a million other iron ingots or barrels of oil or whatever it is. So it's a disconnecting influence. It's not that it isn't sacred, but it's that it's very hard to see that it is sacred. What is easy to see and what gives us a sense of the sacred is when we are in full contact with the uniqueness and infinite relatedness of something. So like if you are in the rainforest maybe, or appreciating another human being by gazing into their eyes, and it's just obvious that this is a totally unique sacred being. So it's thereby a reminder of the sacredness of all things. And so that was one of the motivating ideas of sacred economics. It's how do we make economic life aware of the sacred when it's become so commoditized? And then the ultimate in non-sacredness would be money, which is completely abstracted from the real world in the numbers games of Wall Street. And we're seeing that today, as the stock market, it's taken some hits, but the big corporations are doing okay. compared to the total decimation of small businesses, including a lot of farms, to bring it into that arena.
Right. Well, it's interesting that disconnect, one of the more heinous remarks that I have ever heard is, don't take it personal, it's just business.
Mm-hmm.
I find that framework as part of the lexicon contributing to tremendous disassociation between holding oneself accountable for choice and action, and how it impacts both another human being, but also everything else around us. And I would love to lean into that transformation of not having that notion of separate, of something is kind of stuck inside of one box and it doesn't have to hold connection to this other box.
Yeah, ironically, the response to the coronavirus has been to hold us very literally, physically in boxes.
Yes.
And now we're communicating, we're communicating to each other through a box. And I think that, this is more than just a metaphor. It is a pattern of response to challenge, which is to find a bad guy of some sort, to find an enemy, to find a germ, to find something that you can identify as the cause of the problem and that therefore you can fight. So in conventional agriculture, that bad guy is the weed or the pest, and you know what to do about it. You kill it, or you isolate it. You keep it out. You somehow control it and dominate it. So this pattern of response we're seeing very, very clearly right now, to the detriment of other ways of seeing crisis. So an alternative is the in medicine, it would be the bioterrain theory of disease, which says that germs are better seen as symptoms rather than causes of disease. And then you ask, what is the climate? What in the body that is inviting a germ in and that's allowing it to harm you or to make you sick, when maybe someone else in your family doesn't get sick at all? And is that just because of some nebulous idea of better immunity? Sometimes really healthy people are susceptible to one thing and not another thing. And so then the question is, what is the terrain that gives rise to that provides the conditions for the germ to multiply? And then you could ask the same thing in agriculture. What are the soil conditions that are inviting all these weeds in? Like, do they have a positive purpose? Just as does a flu virus or a cold have a positive purpose in the body to maybe help you expel some kind of wastes or toxins or to meet a challenge? Are the weeds coming in to stabilize the soil? And there are people who can know like what soil deficiency you might have just by looking at the weeds.
Yes. Or
the insects. So this is a whole other way of looking at it that has gotten really marginalized in the official response. And it is, to answer the question that you opened with, like, what is the opportunity here? I think that we're at a crossroads where we could go just double down on the technologies of control and really like obliterate all of the gains of the food movement and the agricultural movement of the last 40 years in favor of a future. And we're hearing a lot about it now. The Gates Foundation is heavily funding this, of precision fermentation and lab-grown meat, which together with hydroponics factories basically means that you don't need soil anymore. And you don't need nature anymore. And, all of these holistic, organic, regenerative farmers, that's maybe an indulgence of the privilege to eat food from these farms. But what's really cheaper and can be done with robots and an automated supply system would be the lab-grown food. And that's one path. And the other path is to say, hold on a second here. This crisis is showing us in sharp relief where we've been going, and we don't have to go this way. And let's reclaim a world of relationship and uniqueness, and look at the terrain that gives rise to all of the things that we attack and blame as the cause of the problem. And let's take a different course right now. That's not the default course, however. Coronavirus isn't going to rescue us from a world of robotified hydroponics and precision fermentation and lab-grown meat.
I agree. Right.
Yeah.
No, it's not. And I think what's interesting is those two juxtapositions you just called forth. The highly technological approach, which, no surprise, Bill Gates loves that approach. And simultaneously, there is the life-affirming, restorative approach to undoing damage done, to changing the conversation towards how do we reify our relationship to a living world? How do we use what we have to be healers as opposed to extractors? And I think that there is a lot of talk out there. I'm watching a bunch of different celebrities and other pundits talking, and often they're raising this kind of a query, is this an opportunity point? Is this a portal? Is this some doorway that we can go through that is a yes and? I don't know that it's necessarily completely unacceptable to do some of the things that that group that wants to do technological approaches to food production. Maybe there are certain scenarios where that's very helpful. But in the other side, if you look at these larger challenges that you speak so eloquently of in your book, Climate: A New Story, if we stay with the attack motif, if we always have to have an enemy that we're going after, we will never step into a more holistic perceiving of the interconnectivity between everything. And without that perception, we really will not have the types of conversations that help elevate us to a much broader, sensitive perceiving of life and our co-relationship with everything on this planet, which is alive, as you know.
Yes. Yeah. I would just say amen to that. Not sure how to continue. That feels like a good statement.
Well, thank you. I would. Well, let me go back to something you were saying a moment ago, where you were talking about the bioterrain and you were likening it to agriculture. So I think I work a lot in the regenerative agriculture conversation. I find that it has this extraordinary potential as a more healing and more holistic, nested perceiving of a landscape as a specific place, a unique place. You talk about, the uniqueness. Every single plot of place is unique to that place. It's not equivalent to, even down the road, you can look at a different outcome because there's little unique microclimates happening.
Right.
Soil qualities and what's happened over time. So let's lean into that different viewpoint that you advocate for it around, let's not create an enemy. Let's not have to create an us and them motif in order to think deeply about how to attend to a problem. What is that alternative? Let's speak to that alternative.
Yeah, it's about relationship. So what you're talking about, how each farm is unique, how the conditions in one valley might be different from the valley next to it, let alone from one continent to another continent. This means that to apply holistic or regenerative agriculture, whatever word we're going to use, you can't do it in in the way that we are accustomed to addressing problems in policy on a mass scale, because there's no like formulaic set of practices that here's what you should do. It depends. What you should do is different from this farm, on this farm, and on that farm, depending on the soil conditions, the microclimate, and the cultural conditions around it. Mm. Even if the physical conditions are the same, the cultural conditions might be different. In one place, you might have a lot of excess labor, unemployed people who, could work in the soil. And so some techniques might make a lot more sense there than, out in the high plains where there's not very many people and you already have tractors and things like that. So it's about using what is available in the spirit of healing and vivifying the land. So to understand ourselves as servants of life, and to know that because we're not separate from life, that the more alive a place becomes, the more we thrive as well. The more alive we become, including the more healthy we become, the more vibrant we become. Like this is a basic tenet of understanding ourselves in relationship. So, yeah, we're now. Where was I going to go with that? You asked about.
Well, it's sort of that.
Find the enemy, right?
Yes, the enemy, exactly.
Right. So it's a matter of understanding what the origin and the set of relationships that give rise to the disharmony that makes it look like an enemy. And you could apply this to anything. I mean, you could apply it to, I spoke about germs, but you could apply it to crime too. Is the cause like these bad criminals that just inexplicably, because they're bad, so they do bad things. And so what do you have to do? You have to lock them up, keep them out, make physical barriers between you and them, surveil. Actually what you have to do is the same things you have to do when you think that we're being victimized by germs, and pretty much the same things you have to do to protect your crops from weeds. You have to keep out the weed seeds. You have to kill them when they get in. You have to keep track of everything. You have to impose control over something that is outside of yourself. And like you were saying, that doesn't mean that we should never kill a germ, like never use antibiotics ever, or never pull up a weed. But if we only do that, and we are locked into the find an enemy worldview, then we'll never even look at the terrain. We'll never ask these questions. Why are there weeds coming up every year in this field and not in my neighbor over there who's been doing organic no-till for 20 years? Why am I getting recurrent strep infections or my child getting recurrent earaches when that kid over there isn't? Like, you never even ask that question if your answer is, well, because some random virus came in and made me sick. Yeah. So this is it's a big shift of worldview, and it comes down to this worldview has roots in an invisible to most people level of who are we and how does reality work and what is the world and how does humanity progress and where do we come from? So it's part of this worldview of domination and control comes from a mythology that narrates human progress as starting out helpless, ignorant, superstitious, but then we developed science and technology and we began to become the masters of nature, and someday we're going to complete that mastery and conquer the germs and conquer the weeds and have a perfectly controlled paradise. Like, yeah.
Yuck.
But that's implicit in a lot of visions of progress and development, So to unearth, if you don't unearth that and you say, well, maybe we shouldn't just kill the germs or kill the weeds, you sound like a crazy person. If you take for granted that that's what progress is. So that's why I became a philosopher, really, because I see that the change in mindset has to go down to that level for the holistic and the regenerative even to make sense at all.
Absolutely. And I agree with you so deeply on the indoctrination process that creates an unquestioning journey. So many people just take it as fact that their belief system is the best perspective or worldview, and then they are guided by that in every choice they make. And I have compassion, of course. I was raised in a very conservative upbringing, and it was my own volition to seek and look for other ways of perceiving that has led me down the path that I've chosen. But I think to make it more socially okay to ask better questions, to even help the process of query in our society, because it's how well the question is asked that will open up other possibilities as what could be potential responses. I think that is another interesting aspect of this challenge. As you're saying so well, we have to have something we're fighting against, as opposed to looking at the larger nested reality and all of the interconnected pieces and elements that rise into the complex moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And having something to fight against also plays into the interests of those who administer the war machine, the fighting machine. So that encourages the authorities, even if they have no conscious intention of doing so, it encourages them to inflate various threats, especially threats where there is an identifiable enemy, and to see threats, to see things that way, even if it's really more complex.
Yes. Well, I think part of it is we're a little intimidated by complexity. And so we've really felt rescued by reductionist thinking.
Yeah. There's almost a relief there, if we're facing, like, say, decaying democracy, then there's a kind of a relief in saying, aha, that was because of Vladimir Putin, rather than, if you don't blame it on the Russians or whoever. Now, things are so polarized now that probably people think, oh, he must be a Trump supporter but whatever. Okay. Like, if you don't go there to some convenient scapegoat, then you're faced with a problem that you don't understand, you can't reduce to one thing, but that probably involves yourself. Same thing with the decline in health. It's not like we were getting healthier and healthier and all of a sudden coronavirus came around. As a society, in my lifetime, we've been getting less and less healthy. Just more chronic disease, more autoimmunity, more reliance on pharmaceuticals just to get by, rising levels of allergies, of depression, addiction. We're not healthy. And this is troubling, and there's no easy culprit. It's not like society got infected with a virus that all of a sudden is causing all of these conditions that we could fight, But now, finally, here comes a threat that is a virus, or at least looks like one. So now, finally, here's Vladimir Putin in virus form.
Yes, exactly.
Here's a war that we have already fought, and now we can fight it again.
Right.
And we won.
Deploy.
We won the war against infectious disease, and now here comes one. Like, there's a relief almost in it, which lends us to see it. And I'm not sure. I'm sorry to go on this topic, but it's hard to avoid it now. But it encourages us to inflate the threat. And I'm not saying that there isn't one, but if you go into the fringes and the alternative media, there's an awful lot out there that kind of stirs one's doubts. Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think that I don't want to spend as much time on as I want to think more around what is at opportunity here. Because I still lean into what I'm hearing from many different folks is that this has triggered a consideration out of the frenetic pace of especially the American life, the constant going, the human doing as opposed to a human being. And there has been a forced pause. Some people obviously have just, are drinking more and watching more Netflix, but other people are picking up a paintbrush for the first time in years. I'm one of those people. It's like I haven't pulled out my paints in years, and now I am. But I also think this is an opportunity for re-engineering the opportunity. I don't really want to use the word engineering, for evoking the imagination around what kind of future do we want? What is the world we truly want to be co-creating together?
Mm-hmm.
And given that we are going to be restarting the engine of our economy, this, I know, will be difficult to maybe insert in the immediate process, but maybe as we unfold, could we be creating and moving toward a world that is a healthier, more vibrant, more inclusive, more nurturing global society? As we now can see, we are one on this planet.
Yeah. I do not take it for granted that we're going to restart the engine of the economy. A lot of the ways that society has adapted to the situation were already in progress, and we have the technological means to continue. Never going to retail stores, and never going to, I'm sorry to say it, farmers markets and things. So I think but the opportunity here is that the interruption of normal and it's both an interruption of normal and an intensification of longstanding trends. It does give people a pause where they can ask, how do I want to live? Like you were saying, and to make a conscious, it has to be a conscious choice to live in a different way than the default. But a lot of people are being faced with that choice right now, and they are defecting from the from life as it had been offered to us, normal as it had been offered to us. For some people, the defection takes the form of, I'm going to homeschool now. My kids are happier.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could only get them together with other kids and homeschool in groups, do I really want to keep sending them to school? And another way of defecting is to defect from the industrial food system, which it's, my brother is a farmer, and does this farmer's market. It's like almost nobody's coming.
Oh, wow. That's the opposite of what's happening here where I live in Colorado.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The farms, like I have a CSA with a local biodynamic farm here. I'll give them a shout out, Aspen Moon Farm. And they have, as have many others in our community, they have created safe farm stand access. Our local farmers market has put a whole online system up so that people can go and purchase from the different farms, and then they're setting up safe pickups.
His CSA business is up.
Yes.
He is doing like a lot more deliveries and things like that. But like this is one, and gardening is resurging now too.
Totally. I love it. And that's good for the climate.
Yes. So in states where it's allowed anyway, in some states they've restricted, like put nurseries and things like that as non-essential.
Close them down.
Yeah. But there is this turn toward this defection from the industrial food system. as on the one hand, the industrial food system has intensified, where you have, the smaller health food stores and stuff, a lot of them are closed down. And it's a lot easier to order your groceries, from Amazon or to stand in line.
Or
right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's going in both directions at once.
Right.
And it's giving us it's harder to sit on the fence anymore.
True. That's what I like about it. I think there's a certain requirement to consider. You have to consider. You can't walk out your door now without consideration. Do you have your mask? Do you, are you prepared to be out in the world in a way that is safe for you and safe for others? That I think is interesting as a consideration. And I'm going to just remind everyone who's listening, this is Seleyn DeYarus. I'm talking with Charles Eisenstein, and this is Regenerative Voices, Elevating Stories, Activating Change, produced by At the Epicenter. Charles is a deep thinker and author of Climate, A New Story, Sacred Economics, and other extraordinary books that will definitely get your mind tingling if you pick them up, which I hope you will. So we were just sort of going back and forth around some of the ways in which, as you said, there has to be, for many people, whether they were comfortable with it or not, a pause of reconsidering, of adapting to, and having to look at and make new choices.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the life I took for granted as normal or unchangeable.
Right.
Like now I have a choice. Like I don't have to take that for granted anymore. It may not be always an obvious choice. Like it may not be that I know, like, here's the ready-made alternative. It could be like, wow, I really don't want to keep living this way and I don't know what to do about it. But that state of consternation heightens one's awareness and alertness to other opportunities. So I think a lot of people are in that stage where this discontent is bubbling, but it doesn't really have a way to express itself. So maybe the food movement and the farming movement can offer an avenue for the expression of this desire to live in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the food movement, that's a very interesting point. I mean, there's, as you said, a lot of the farms that have been in the food service space where they've been providing food to restaurants and universities and those types of institutions, they are struggling because suddenly a huge part of their market has just evaporated. And we've seen the images of squashes just piled up and rotting in fields. And then you have, like you said, the CSAs, which are consumer supported agriculture, which community supported agriculture, where you buy a share in a farm and you get to pick up what is being harvested. And these types of focused agricultural activities are thriving right now because suddenly we're going into grocery stores and seeing empty shelves, and we still need to feed our families. So suddenly, if you had never considered that, you are. And in addition to that, people are buying seeds and planting them themselves and experiencing the wonder of gardening. And so within all of that variety of experience, I also think it's interesting that we're also seeing the dark side of the food system, particularly with the meat supply system. And for those of us who have been watching that accumulation of density in specific places, moving away from smaller production systems that used to be so predominant in our society, now we have these huge processing facilities that are, I think, dehumanizing, stripping of humanity of those who have to do that work, as well as how we treat the animals, both in their lives leading up to their demise is, I think, an opportunity right now to sort of ask ourselves, how can we bring respect back into that ecosystem? Because animals have an important role to play in healing lands. They have been put into densities that are toxic, but you put hogs on the landscape, you put, chickens moving across the landscape, you put cattle moving across the landscape. You can go look at so many examples of farmers where when they do those kind of polycultures, everything thrives. Everything thrives. So it's an opportunity, although, where will we step there? I don't know.
Yeah, it really is offering us a choice. It could go either way. And it's just, I think that the impact on our relationship to food is just starting right now as a result of this crisis. But when later in the year, we could really be facing food shortages that are going to put this, at the forefront of people's minds. Already, a lot of meatpacking plants are shutting down. As you were saying, a lot of crops are getting composted, turned under. And it seems like it hasn't fully reverberated through the food supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
But already we're starting to notice some stuff is not on the supermarket shelves anymore. And if we have food rationing, which I think is quite likely, you might not be able to go to, Whole Foods and get your organic food anymore. If you want organic food, you might have to grow it yourself. You might have to have relationships with local farmers. The choice will become much more stark. The existence of Whole Foods, for example, kind of allows you to keep sitting on the fence, to participate in a less bad industrial system. So, I don't want to predict food shortages, but for anyone listening, I do think it's a really good time to plant a garden, to have food for yourselves, and maybe more importantly, food to share with our neighbors.
Exactly.
Because really, health is about relationship. I don't think that ultimately social distancing and lockdown are even good for our health, because, for the psychological health, our need for human contact, for touch, to be in shared space together, to relate in relationship to non-human beings, to a place. When we're on a screen here, we're not really relating to anything but each other. We're not in a shared context. So psychological health is important, but also physical health, to interact with the world of germs that constantly replenish your inner ecology. So the opportunity here is to say, okay, enough. Let's move back toward being ecological beings. So this takes one form of expression in medicine or health, with the importance of the microbiome, et cetera, et cetera. And it takes another form of expression in our outer ecological relationships to soil, to the biodiversity around us, to the cultural relationships that are built on that. It's all part of the same movement. We will not have ultimately a organic regenerative food movement will not thrive if it's not accompanied by a concurrent move toward community, sociality, and relationship. Like this, we are not going to be able to be in quarantine, ultimately in quarantine for medical reasons, and have a regenerative food system.
I think it's a very interesting point you raised, particularly as we just lean into the power of the idea of relationship, which is kind of bringing us back to the beginning point around what is a sense of the sacred. And a sense of the sacred is a relationship. It's also one of my favorite ideas, and is the idea of reciprocity. of how we are in a perfectly balanced reciprocity, the earth in relationship to the sun, that is providing for the extraordinary conditions that allow life to thrive. And we as humans, we have an opportunity always to sort of wake up to the relationship we have to one another, the relationship that we have to where we find ourselves, and are we in our best expression of our fullest capacity to be bringing our best self forward. And I think that is perhaps being more triggered for people right now around, am I who I want to be? And how can I be more authentic in my life? I do think there is some activation of that inner voice in people because of all of the many, many numerative distractions that aren't as accessible, that, like we said before, there's that pause may provide that type of considering.
Yes. Yeah, it's a crucible, isn't it? It brings up things that were not otherwise available or accessible to us to notice. Questions that had been under the surface of the rush of life. You know, getting to work on time, getting those kids off to school. Are they doing their homework? You know, like all this, the rush and press of life just doesn't even give you time.
Practice, getting them to piano lessons,
Yeah.
all of the busy buzz. Yeah. And like suddenly the buzz has just been chopped off. And that's intense, obviously. I get it. And for some people, this couldn't be more horrific. And
yeah, I mean, this is another. So on one level, it brings up stuff personally. You know, you have if you're able to work from home, you know, if you have some financial backstop, some cushion or something like that, for those people, it has not really impacted life that much anymore yet. I mean, you know, you're still eating, like you still. And the way that you eat is still pretty much the same. You know, you go to the supermarket, you maybe have to stand in line longer. The way you get products to your house, still the same. What has changed for those people? But even for them, it's bringing up, you know, in the crucible of the, I mean, there you are with your spouse maybe, you know, and it's bringing stuff, flushing stuff to the surface. And then on a social level, it's also flushing stuff to the surface in the form of the desperate conditions of vast numbers of people, the Uber drivers, the hotel maids, the cashiers, the small business owners, like all the school janitors, you know, I mean, all the people who are unemployed right now, tens of millions of them, I mean, some of them are like idle as well and able to look at their lives, but also facing food insecurity. But on a social level, this is bringing up like a higher awareness of the shadows of our society, like the inequalities, the poverty, and yeah, it's making the invisible visible.
Yes, it is.
In many ways.
Yes, I think that is potentially, I mean, we're in an election year in the United States, which is very fascinating how this will play out. But certainly, whatever happens next, this kind of reveal around the vast inequities and the reveal of the injustices that are so broadly experienced by so many people who are hardworking, honest individuals who have carved out a reality that could keep them basically taken care of. some food on the table and a roof over their heads, and yet they have no paid time off. They're not allowed to be sick and get paid. They have no health care. I mean, it's, as you said, it is really revelatory around just how inequitable the way people are treated. It's like that dignity, going back to that quote I read in the beginning, you know, everyone has inherent value. That all human life, all life deserves the dignity of its existence to be held and taken care of to some level. I mean, there should not be homelessness. There should not be impoverished families where children don't get a warm meal in the morning and lunch in the afternoon and dinner at night.
Yeah. I mean, I read some article, it was in National Geographic actually a number of years ago, about hunger in America, and saying that like during the holidays, there's a lot more child hunger because they depend on the school breakfast and school lunch for their food. And I'm wondering like how many kids are going hungry right now?
Well, there are massive responses going on in food school systems all over this country, trying to keep that thread of connectivity so that these children are being fed. But I think that to me is one of those potent reveals of how dependent so many families are. And like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't like to hear the word socialism, but I've lived in Europe and I've witnessed societies where if you're homeless, you've opted for that because there is an entire system in place that you don't have to go without. You will be supported. You will be offered a basic income so that you can afford to be in a home and have food. And they will invest in training you for opportunities for work. And that works in many societies around the world, that this country, which touts itself as being the wealthiest nation in the world, the inequities in our culture are really unacceptable.
Yes. Although it can also be said that in, Europe, which is mostly what you're talking about, like this safety net has been unraveling for quite a long time. And that's part of a bigger conversation about economics. But I had another thought I wanted to share with you. As our dependency, so as people are becoming unemployed, losing their food security, they become dependent on even more than ever before, like on these stimulus checks, and perhaps ultimately on a state-provided universal basic income. And I have really mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, I don't think that people should have to be forced to do degrading work just to live, when there's so much creativity that could be going toward healing society and healing the earth and artistic expression and so forth. So a universal basic income allows that. But on the other hand, it also creates dependency on the state for your monthly pittance contingent on your good behavior. Wouldn't it be better so then like the libertarian right, they're like, yeah, we should plant your garden, store up your food, become self-reliant. But really isn't it where we should go toward reliance, not on self, not on state, but on community?
Yes.
So I think that this breakdown in our centralized systems can be an invitation to self-sufficiency, plant your own garden, get your guns to make sure no one takes it. Like there's that whole line.
Yeah.
But it could also be an invitation back into community, back into taking care of each other, which is neither right nor left. But I think that it appeals to people that like we have a cultural memory of times where we did know each other and did take care of each other. That's the opportunity here, where the final straw that breaks the back of the camel of reliance on centralized institutions leads us toward communitarianism, not individualism, where we can pull on that cultural memory and say, yeah, this is a precious thing that's been lost, and how do we get it back?
Right.
And I think that food is, I mean, that's like the primal way of taking care of another being. You feed that being. It's the easiest first step into mutual care when there's a breakdown right now. And maybe to answer the question we started with, I think that is a tremendous opportunity. And I hope that if we put if we're aware of this opportunity and think in those terms, then all kinds of ideas are going to occur to us about how to create local resiliency and mutual aid and mutual care when we can no longer trust the supermarket supply chain.
Well, and I think to move from the I mentality to the we is vital for there is a lot more coming down the path towards us as the human family. The climate is a very real destabilized aspect on planet Earth. And we know that is going to add to that food insecurity you're speaking to. That's going to add to a lot of the disruptions that we're having now. There are other disruptions on the horizon. And at the same time, we have tremendous opportunity to attend to those through a more place-centric orientation where we focus on how we can co-create in place healthier, living, vibrant ecosystems by working, in Colorado, there's a lot of effort going on to pay attention to this issue on our landscapes here in Colorado. Similarly, if place all over the planet was thinking to this orientation, Charles, of we're going to work in where we are to ensure that there is an attention to our connectivity, to our relationship to each other, our relationship to our land and our water. There's a lot of yet to be tapped genius to emerge in that journey.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Hey, I'm just hesitating here. I'm wondering, should I launch into my views about climate and Earth healing?
Let's just go there a little bit, and yeah. I think I'd like to hear you on that point.
Yeah, I mean, you've read my book and you heard me speak at the conference. I think that the problem is miscast by the mainstream. I don't think that we should be looking at carbon. I don't think that we should be framing it in terms of global warming or even necessarily climate change. I think that the issue is the degradation of the organs and tissues of a living being called Gaia.
Yes.
And that if we continue doing that, carbon dioxide levels aren't going to matter. Even if we cut carbon to zero, if we keep destroying the rainforests and the temperate forests and the wetlands and the soil and decimate the species, then the planet still dies of organ failure. And that the best thing we can do to serve the healing of Gaia is to protect any healthy ecosystems that still exist and to restore the ones that have been damaged.
Yes, agree. Absolutely.
And the best thing farmers can do then is to restore soil and restore water. So,
and that is that holistic framework, right? That is holistic framing.
Yeah. And it is, it's holistic rather than saying, okay, what's the one thing, the enemy, the cause of all the bad things? Because it may not be one thing. We're comfortable with it being a one thing because then we can have a centralized response to it that isn't unique to every place.
Back to our germ conversation. It's like back to that enemy thinking of, if there's something I can reduce it down to, then I feel safe. I have power. I have control.
Yes. one of my concerns for a number of years now has been, because the environmental movement has pinned all of its hopes, all of its arguments, well, not all, but most, onto global warming and hitched the environmental wagon to the global warming horse. What happens if that theory was wrong? What happens if we start to see cooling temperatures? What happens if the skeptics and the dissidents were right and we are entering a new ice age? And we've put all of our marbles in that box, put all our eggs in that basket. What happens then?
Precisely.
Because, because
we've missed that true opportunity to reimagine our relationship to the sacred gift of life, the gift.
Right.
You say living in the gift. Let's take that framework, the living in the gift, and how you correlate that to the opportunity in front of us.
Yeah, it's understanding ourselves. Like it's to go to the level of mythology. It's the answer to the question, why am I here? What is a human being for? And what is a species? What is humanity for? In ecology, every species contributes to the wholeness. And its removal damages everybody because each species carries gifts to the ecosystem. We're supposed to be the same way. We're supposed to be a positive on Earth. It's not that nature would be better off without us, as many environmentalists seem to think. It's simply that we have not applied our gifts toward their true purpose, which is to elevate the livingness of Earth and the complexity of Earth, and the beauty of Earth. That's why we're here as a species, and that's why we're here as individuals too. When we understand that we're here to bring gifts, then our conception of technology, agriculture, everything changes. And that perception that we're here as gifts, as gift bringers, gift bearers, that is fed by gratitude, which is the recognition that life itself is a gift. We didn't invent seeds. We didn't invent water. We didn't create the sun. We didn't earn our mothers taking care of us. We didn't earn breath. Like all of these things were gifts. So obviously, we're here to give of those gifts. It's an ecological principle, it's a social principle, it's a spiritual principle. And can we build a world around that? That's what I would like to see.
I would like to see that too. And I think this is a beautiful time to conclude this conversation on this beautiful notion of living in the gift. Because I think for many right now, there is a capacity to perceive that gift. And if we can all make it our priority to honor ourself as a gift, that which is around us as a gift, and then to ask, how can I be in service to the highest expression of the gift around me and my gift? I'd like to give you the final word.
Oh, I just would say I really resonate with that. And I see the next step in farming is a return to that awareness. We have it in the language, the gifts of the land. If you really take that seriously, the gifts of the land, then you also start to think about the gifts to the land, the gifts to the soil. Like, how do we enter the circle of the gift in our relationship to our food supply? Yes.
I love that. The circle of the gift. Yeah. Well, this has been a gift of time with you. Again, I thank you so much for joining me for Regenerative Voices, Elevating Stories, Activating Change, Charles. And I wish you well, and may you get to your brother's farm for some respite and renewal. And let's do this again.
Yeah, thank you, Seleyn. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
The Regenerative Voices Elevating Stories, Activating Change podcast series is produced by At the Epicenter, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The podcast and video recordings are made possible by the generous support of people like you. Make a tax-deductible donation or sign up as a monthly supporter by visiting attheepicenter.com/donate. Support packages start at $1 per month. The podcast series is also sponsored by several corporate and organization sponsors. To become a podcast sponsor, visit attheepicenter.com/contact to let us know of your interest. If you found this podcast episode insightful and meaningful, please pass it on by sharing it with a friend or colleague who will also enjoy it. Thank you for tuning in, for your support, and for activating change.